Greetings, everyone, boys and girls. Good morning, good afternoon. This is a special edition remembering Zambia's first Republican president, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, who unfortunately passed on at the age of 97. If he had lived, he would have been 102 years. Today, I have a panel of experts coming from different fields of the private sector, the public sector, and government. So we are blessed to have these people to share their memories, their thoughts, reflections, what they thought or what they think about the Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, who has in his lifetime contributed greatly to the freedom and emancipation of African people, particularly in Southern Africa. We have a historian here who is going to be talking a little bit more on the historicity of some of these things, because I know I wasn't there in 1964 when Zambia got its independence. I came along, I think, must have been 15 years later after Zambia got its independence. But there are people who were there to talk about the happenings. So let's introduce our panelists so we can get the show on the road. So we have Professor Perry. Professor Perry is a historian, and we have Dr. Maponda. We have Mr. Kaluba, who is a veteran journalist. We have Mr. Walia, and we have, of course, we are mindful of the ladies. We were hoping to have two ladies, but at least we are happy that we have one, and Mrs. Mwila is representing the ladies out there, so we didn't leave our women out there. So let's get the show on the road. Professor Perry, give us a little bit about just your introduction so that people can know who you are and which sector you are representing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Njovu. My name is Professor Bizek Jube Piri. I'm a professor of history at the University of Zambia in the Department of Historical and Archaeological Studies. And I've worked all my working life for 3 years now at the University of Zambia, where I've been teaching. And I had an opportunity over the years to interact face-to-face with President Kaunda when he was in office, and even when after he retired.
Oh, yeah. That's very good. That's very good to have somebody who has first-hand information. So now we're going to go to Dr. Sydney. Dr. Sydney, your introduction, sir.
Thank you, Noah. And viewers, Sydney Mponda is currently working as head of Software Publishers. I love to introduce myself as a storyteller, and I love to tell Software Publishers not only focus on the publishing of anything, but stories that speak to our Zambian as well as African values. And I've taken interest in historical publication and stories, and the privilege from 2018 until 2021, when Kenneth Kaunda died, to meet him countless times where we are doing programs to do with intergenerational conversation, because he represented the generation that was different. So basically, that's who I am, and I remain a very patriotic Zambian. I've added very, in the sense that sometimes we preach these things, but we are trying to live by these actions as well as learning from those who have gone before us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we're going to move to Mrs. Judith Mwila. Give us your introduction so that people know who you are and what organization you represent.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be part of this session and the interview concerning Dr. Kaunda. My name is Judith Mwila. I am founder and actually I'm the country director of an organization called Families Are Nations. One of the things that I need to mention because of the nature of this interview is the fact that I was born in 1964, and 1964 for us who were born that time is all branded in KK, because due to our age, we were always growing older with Zambia. And because he's the founding father of Zambia, he stands and still remains a very critical figurehead in my life. I am a social scientist, and I majored in human development. So my line of business really is community service, and I am a counselor in many fields. But most of all, I am a family oriented specialist. All the things that I do, as I mentioned, my organization is called Families Are Nations. We are focusing on family development outrightly. I had several times met with Dr. Kaunda. In fact, the third and last time that we met with him, we had a great time because we were doing what we call intergenerational person. I took a group of young people to his home. That time, I think he was around now 80 something. I can't quite remember the exact age, but he was in his late 80s. He had time to play with the kids and dance with them. And really, we had a great time. The other time that we went to see him, he actually, his usual blessing way, he laid his hand upon me and said that this thing that you are doing, your calling on the family is the answer to Zambia. I have never forgotten those words, and I'll always cherish them. Thank you so much. And I hope that this interview can help me to relive my lovely and memorable times with Dr. Kaunda. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Well said, well said. Now we're gonna go to the next one is a veteran journalist and media consultant. This is Mr. Austin Kalova. Mr. Austin Kalova, give us a little bit of a background so that people get to know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Austin Kalova. I'm primarily a journalist, though I'm also an author. I write poetry. I'm a bilingual writer. I write in Chivemba and the English. I'm also a translator. I was born 2 years after independence, and I grew up during the Kaunda era. And having been a journalist for 30 years, I can tell you that Kaunda has impacted very positively on this country. He set very high standards of governance, which have never been emulated from 1991.
Mr. Walia, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm really humbled and honored to be part and parcel of this panel. My name is Nelson Wadia. I'm the student union president from Mukuba University. It's one of the public higher learning institutions that we have in Zambia. I'm in 4th year doing biomedical sciences. I never had time to actually meet our former Republican President, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, but I would always be inspired every time I would watch him on TV, telling stories of inspirations. I'm always, again, inspired by philanthropists, and it is for that reason that I came up with a foundation called Girl Up, where we've been actually providing sanitary materials for our girls, because in the issue and how much women in society, because they really help even in the agenda of national development. And it is for that reason that I came up with that foundation, where we call all stakeholders to come on board and support this movement. And unfortunately, we do not have that financial capacity. So the foundation has somehow been inactive. So that's Nelson Waga.
Premier Media is one of the fastest growing independent media enterprises that produces bias-free content and streams educational programs to empower Africans, African Americans, and the African diaspora around the globe. Premier Media owns and operates a valuable portfolio of streaming programs, such as Primetime Show, The Circle of Love, Leadership Files, and Revolution. Not forgetting our signature development panel series, which features experts around the world that highlight challenges and opportunities in Africa, putting Africa in the center of global conversations. For more information, visit us at premiermedia.com or follow us on social media.
Yes, follow us on social media, share with your friends, your cousins, your uncles, your aunties, to follow us on social media. So now we are back with our conversation with Professor Perry. So Professor Perry is an academia coming from the space of education. So Professor Perry, the first question I have for you here is, from a historian's perspective, what distinguished Dr. Kenneth Kaunda's leadership from that of other post-independent African leaders? What stood out for KK?
Thank you very much for this very important question, and most importantly, for the honor of inviting me to be part of this team. Looking at that question, what is most significant, what distinguished President Kenneth David Kaunda's leadership from other post-independence leaders, is that first and foremost, when we look at President Kaunda, from the time that he began to be engaged in the politics of this country, before Zambia attained independence in 1964, President Kaunda, from the time of his birth in school, he began to fight for the liberation of Zambia, for Zambia to attain independence. And his philosophy of humanism was developed during the early years before he even became president of this country. Historically, in the 1960, for example, when he went to the United States and met with Martin Luther King Jr., in that conversation that they had, the discussion that when you look at the history, his focus was that he needed a nation which embraced everyone. A nation, when he was talking about independence, he was not talking about getting rid of people who are not black, white people. For him, he was looking at a nation where everybody became a part of the development of the country. When Zambia attained independence on 24th October 1964, President Kaunda came out very clearly and indicated that the independence of Zambia was incomplete, that the independence of Zambia was incomplete when other nations surrounding Zambia were still under colonial rule. And it was for that reason that he became a champion of the liberation of Southern Africa. He deliberately ensured that he supported the freedom struggle in Angola, the freedom struggle in Mozambique, the freedom struggle in Namibia, Rhodesia then, what is Zimbabwe today, and South Africa. So in other words, he looked at himself as a person that was ready. And in doing so, he ensured that he was not doing that alone. He was a man that wanted to work with everyone. He embraced everybody. And that was President Kaunda. He embraced everybody. And in embracing everybody, he ensured that the policies that the country and the UNIP was carrying was in the interest of everyone. But I think focusing on Zambia, President Kaunda ensured that one of the challenges that this country had, as we all know, it's a country that has 93 ethnic groups. And President Kaunda and his team, the first cabinet when they attained independence, was that Zambia must become a united country. And that is why, even at the time when they were fighting for independence, they came up with the motto. He came up with the motto, one Zambia, one nation. In other words, he was saying it doesn't matter which ethnic group you come from, you are Zambian. And because you are Zambian, you must participate and contribute to the freedom of this country, to the development of this country, and ensure that you move along with everybody. And because of that motto, Zambia is over 60 years of independence, and Zambia has continued to be a united country. If the philosophy and the policies that Kaunda and in UNIP put forward would not have been done that way, Zambia would have been a very divided country. But we have remained united because of the focus and the determination that he put in across. You may recall that in 1968, President Kaunda resigned as president of UNIP and as president of this country. And Arthur Winer wrote a book. I don't know how many of you have read that book, A Night Without a President. The reason for Kaunda's resignation was that he argued that he cannot be a president, he could not be a president of a country divided on tribal lines. He could not lead a party divided on tribal lines. And he said he was not a tribalist. And therefore, if people want to practice tribalism in UNIP, he was going to move out. And it took Arthur Winer and others, Grey Zulu and so on, to persuade him to come back. After that, President Kaunda, his determination to get rid of tribalism succeeded, and Zambia remained united. And people may want to know that in the First Republic, what we call the First Republic, from 1966 to 1973, when we had the opposition party, the African National Congress, which was led by Harry Mangankobra, there were a lot of conflicts, people fighting, people being killed. And through negotiations, President Kaunda and his UNIP decided that the only one way to sustain unity and oneness in the country was that the country should have a one party, so that everybody belongs to one party, so that we are not fighting along tribal lines. And that is why, after the signing of the Choma Declaration in 1973, Zambia became a one-party participatory democracy. And what UNIP did and what Kaunda did was to ensure that those who were in African National Congress were incorporated into the governance of the country under UNIP. And they were even incorporated in UNIP. And we saw that incorporation sustaining unity from 1973 to 1991 to the 90s, when people began to say, no, I think we want to go back to multi-party democracy. In short, what I'm saying is that Kaunda's vision for this country was unity, that the country should remain a united country, and he succeeded in doing that. He made sure that everybody, and when you look at it, I always have a picture. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. In my office at the University of Zambia, in my office, the picture of the first cabinet. When you look at that picture, you see the representation of all the regions, the different parts of the country in the cabinet, because the idea was everybody must be there. And that is where the firm foundation that Zambia is enjoying today of unity was produced and concretized. So in other words, President Kaunda was a man that ensured that Zambia remained a united country. But like I've pointed out already, he indicated that he was not satisfied. And he worked with others. He normally referred to President of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, as my brother, and the President of Botswana, Sasilesi Kama, as my brother. They said, we cannot continue to enjoy our independence when our 5 friends are not enjoying independence. And it is for that reason that President Kaunda became a founder of the Frontline States. The Frontline States was an organization that was focused on fighting for independence for the countries that were still under colonial rule. And when these countries began to attain independence, and they became independent, they had gotten rid of freedom of thought, that Frontline States transformed into SADC, the Southern African Development Coordination Committee, which was focusing on liberation. When all the countries were now independent, and South Africa had also become independent, the SADC became the SADC we know today, the Southern African Development Community. In other words, Kaunda was saying, for this region to be freely independent, it must be a region that manages its own economy, its own economic development. Those are some of the things that Kaunda did. So in other words, he was not just focusing on Zambia alone. He was focusing on the region.
The region, Africa.
He was focusing on the region and Africa at large. Now we talk about Africa at large. You noted that Kaunda also became a very strong leader in the Organization of African Union. He led that organization. He held a position in that organization.
That's good. Yeah. So it's just
Nations. President Kaunda also had a very strong voice in the United Nations. So in other words, he carried the voice of the Africans, not just Zambians, but Africans in the United Nations. He spoke that there's no way the United Nations can be talking about itself looking at the goodwill of the people when it is ignoring what is happening on the African continent. So he contributed significantly to the liberation and independence of all the countries in Africa. Maybe I can pause here for now.
Yes, I think well said, sir, because I think some of us, I didn't even know that there was a time when there was a day without the president. So this is part of the reason why we do these programs, so that at least we can learn. In 1964, I was not there, but I'm thankful for the information you're sharing. So we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to proceed with Dr. Muponda. In your bio, you have emphasized the importance of written word in preserving history. Why is it important that Dr. Kaunda's legacy is documented and retold for future generations?
Thank you very much. Yes, we might have not been there, but because we have shown interest, at times you'll find that we are even helping and narrating what would have happened to the people who were there, because they might have not actually taken interest. So the response to the question, I start with saying it is important to document and have the written word in preserving history, because without documentation, memory becomes fragile. And the nation that does not preserve its history, it means that we are denying the next generation to know what the history of this particular country has been, especially some of the things that the professor has just outlined. especially what contributions that Kenneth Kaunda and his team made for the benefit of this nation, as well as that of the world, because Kenneth Kaunda contributed to the history of humanity. He is renowned to be the person who has contributed to the national liberation, as well as that of humanity. I think he's said to be one of the leaders who would go in the tables across the world and speak the truth and speak for what he stood for, that the world needed peace. The world needed not to use violence. So when you look at the oral accounts, they are powerful, yes. We can tell Tushimi riddles to young people. We tell the stories that has been there. But the written word, especially the books, the blogs, as it were, on the websites now in the modern world, as it were, the words that are written allows for a nation to archive the truth. Because when we write, it becomes permanent. And in that way, especially when we are writing works, we'll do fact-checking before we publish the works, so that the nation archives the truth, we verify the facts, and we pass on the lessons across times. Because when some of our members and the leaders who were there, the generation that interacted and were part of the participants on and the life of Kaunda when he was the president, they will not be around, but the written word will be able to guide us to read. Then Dr. Kaunda's life was not only a political one. His leadership carried a lot of moral philosophy. His leadership was around issues of unity, human dignity, discipline, as well as service. So if we don't document those principles through books, speeches, interviews, and the research, the future generations may not remember the slogan, but they will understand the values behind those slogans. They will not be able to know what One Zambia, One Nation meant, but they will read the stories just like Professor was giving us. When you look at the way the cabinet was constructed, despite the first one leaving out the issues of gender, they show that in principle and in action, Dr. Kaunda meant what he actually spoke about. When you read the 1975, the watershed speech, it speaks clearly to what Kaunda stood for. Yes, we need to value our nation, and for the nation to be progressive, we need to borrow strategies and what is working outside of our space, but we should not allow other people's lifestyle and their way of thinking and their form of democracy to dominate ours, because we need to create what we need, what works for us. So in documenting these things, we are not only saying that Dr. Kaunda's life or the nation's history is preserved, but we are saying that Zambia is surviving, and Zambia is going to remember wisely what is written. And as such, it becomes critical. On one end, also, we taking the words of Chinua Achebe, unless the lion tells its story, the story will always glorify the hunter. So by having written words, we begin to reconstruct, because even after independence, we had still left the pen with our colonial masters. Now we use correct and polite words, our cooperating partners. They still controlled how the story was being told. They still told us that Dr. Kaunda and others were labels, when in actual sense, these were nationalists standing for the liberation of the country. So the part of the area history, they wrote it in a manner that we look at our own leaders and freedom fighters as labels, as people who actually were very violent in one way or another. But you understand that they are doing what they did from the point of view of being patriots and wanting to get the nation, get its liberation. So it becomes critical that these things get written and we avoid oral submissions, as it were. So it's from that background that we need to do a lot of writing around our national history, where we are coming from, because unless we know where we are coming from, no understanding where we are and projecting where we need to go as a nation will become difficult. But when we have written documentation, it becomes easier for us to revisit what has been our journey as a country, what has been our success points, what has been the driving and the values that these forefathers stood for. And it's from that background that from Software Publishers, our focus remains telling socially relevant stories, preserving our histories that are Zambian as well as representing that of Africa, so that our stories would continue the mental liberation, because we might have gotten the political liberation, as Kaunda wrote in the foreword for the humanism books, that political liberation without cultural, economic, as well as artistic liberation, it still will remain colonized as a people. So we are advocating for the written work, the written record of our national history, so that it can help us in continuous liberalization and the freeing of the minds that still remain colonized even at this particular time.
Well said, sir. This is why it's important. I agree. There is need for documentation of our history so that at least we are able to tell our own story from our own perspective. So now we're going to be joined by Mrs. Mwila to share some thoughts. So Mrs. Mwila, the question that I have for you is, you have worked extensively on family systems and the behavioral change. How do you see the family unit as central to Dr. Kaunda's vision of humanism?
Thank you very much. I really want to say that Dr. Kaunda basically, and I think over and above in this country, expressed the purpose and the structure of the family as a number one component, even in the issue of unity, in the issue of freedom, in the issue of coexistence. As I said earlier, my organization, Families Are Nations, focuses on the family as an effective agent of behavior change, community well-being, national integrity, and more so, national development. I think when you look at, when you unpack that statement, Dr. Kaunda critically laid the foundation in this country. And that is why I was personally attracted to his form of service as a person who promoted the family system. First of all, Dr. Kaunda himself, when you look at his family as a family man, we put aside the presidential role that he had in our country, the freedom struggle. His focus was really on the well-being of human beings. His philosophy of humanism is all about the well-being of a human being. And you cannot talk about human beings without going back to the basic. And the basic is the family system. And so answering your question on how do I see Dr. Kaunda in terms of family strengthening, first of all, the issue about unity. Dr. Kaunda fought for unity. I've heard from the earlier speakers, it was at regional level, global level. He engaged everyone who could contribute and ensure that there was unity in the world. And you don't talk about unity if the family is divided. So I could see from that Dr. Kaunda had a huge and focus on the family system. The next thing is that in terms of speaking concerning family strengthening, Dr. Kaunda himself, as I said, he was a parent. And all of us are here to actually look at his parenting system. We look at his children, look at the issue of discipline. Dr. Kaunda was that parent who really knew that discipline was a key factor in nurturing the family, in raising children. It is Dr. Kaunda who introduced the national service system. And national service, all of us, I had a privilege to attend it very briefly because the year I went is the year it stopped. At that time, when I left school, I finished grade 12, and our group was the very last because we had to be recalled. Look at the issue about national service, how it brought about a certain discipline in the youths. That system, he brought it in as a part of his governance agenda. And it was very useful. I can tell you myself, the discipline that I have, and I always tell my children and the young people, I say that I wish all of them could undergo national service process. Why? The way national service was structured, it provided an opportunity for young people to have a certain discipline that would last the test of time. I have it myself, and I have nothing to regret about going to national service. The other thing is that when you look at Dr. Kaunda as a father, I think up to today, when we look at the families in this nation, we can single out his family as one of those well-structured, well-articulated, and successful families. Just go through his children. You start from the firstborn to the very last. Dr. Kaunda showed us that family support is possible, total family support. I just want to mention one of the areas that I speak like this about family support in terms of care and support at family level. Dr. Kaunda showed us that that was possible at family level. It is not for us to expect an institution to look after our children. We need to understand that family is the first place where anyone must receive love, must receive nurturing and teaching. A discipline must come from there. It is actually, as the saying goes, that family is where you start with, how you become. Family is the first school. And Dr. Kaunda profiled that very well. I can actually see it in his line of parenting. Thinking about humanism, I want to emphasize the fact that Dr. Kaunda expressed to us through the philosophy of humanism that any man must treat another man the way they want to be treated. So basically, he was saying that the Bible talks to us and says that love one another, and that way we can live well as a community, as a family, as a society. He expressed that in the formation of humanism. Every person must know that the way I treat that one, if they treated me the same way, how would I take that? So I also applaud the philosophy that he introduced, the issue of humanism. Talking about a tribal unity, this is something Dr. Kaunda did very well. In fact, my organization, Families Are Nations, has actually coined a slogan saying that we are one Zambia, one nation, one big family. And I say that because for Dr. Kaunda, tribe was not a limiting factor. As far as he was concerned, tribe is just a name. It does not define anyone. Everyone deserved to get the opportunities that anyone else should get, regardless of which part of this country they came from. Going back to the issue of family, when you talk about tribal unity, Dr. Kaunda promoted inter-tribe marriages. By doing that, he was actually saying we need to mix because we are one. We needed to become one in a certain way. And marriage was one of the ways that we were going to unite as a country. 73 plus tribes to become one. He came up with the intermarriage idea. And a lot of people, I myself, I'm coming from the Eastern Province. I am originally from there. But I got married to someone who comes from the North. And that way, how can we separate our children from ourselves? Our children are both from East and North. So that was very uniting. I want to talk about also the issue of attitude change, the values, family values. An earlier speaker talked about how Dr. Kaunda resigned from the position of president because of attitude, because of people's behavior. I am a behavior change scientist, and I know how hard it is to change people's attitudes, to change their behavior about the way they believe in something. Dr. Kaunda employed various strategies, and one of the strategies was intermarriage. He promoted humanism. He promoted engagement of different tribes into different parts of the country. A minister whose origin is Western, he took them to the East. So I'm saying that you need to practically apply strategies to change the attitude of people. And this is something I want to lament right now, that we don't have it in this age in Zambia. If we took that along with us, I'm sure Zambia would have been a completely different place. Dr. Kaunda told me in, I think it was 2015 or so, when we visited him, and he said to me, what you are doing is very useful for our young people and for our nation to understand the strength of the family as that thing, that unity, that structure that can change the way people think. And that is why when I founded Families Are Nations, one of the people I needed to engage with was Dr. Kaunda, because I realized that when you are talking family, you need to talk about changing the attitude and the way people think, the way they behave, the way they work, the work culture, issues of corruption. All these things can only be changed when we apply the family system as an effective agent of behavior change. Because the people we find in the schools, the people we find in the university, the people that we find in the workspaces, these are people coming from the family system. They must have it in their mind that they can change something. And when we went to see him, another thing he told me was that we need to really to protect the Zambian heritage. And I heard the professor there talking about, and my colleague talking about writing, the importance of preserving information via written information. We don't have these days. Grandmothers and grandchildren, they hardly interact. Dr. Kaunda showed me when we went to visit him with a group of young people. We had children aged from 10 to 18 that day. He talked to them. He was like, he talked about being a grandfather. He talked about being a father. He talked about being a child. And I could see that this man, he was passionate about saving those things of our heritage that can build us, that can strengthen our families, that can strengthen personal character. And character education is something that Dr. Kaunda held in high esteem. I don't know how much more I can say, but I believe that what I have spoken about right now in the issue of family system, Dr. Kaunda lived it. He's a leader that lived and led by example. When he, a minister, I also want to remember, there are stories of ministers who misbehaved. Dr. Kaunda fired that minister because he didn't want any embarrassment. And all that was coming from the family system. I want to say Dr. Kaunda valued the family. And we can see that from his legacy. We can see it in his children. We can see it. I always remember how Madam Betty Kaunda was such a wonderful wife. He talked about her. He always proudly expressed love to his wife in public. He always, said nice things about. We don't see much of that in our marriages today. And that is why I imagine if Dr. Kaunda was still alive, how he would react to a number of 9,000 divorces in a city of Lusaka. If he lived in Lusaka today and read in the newspaper that there were 9,000 divorces, I just would imagine what would come upon his face. I think he would cry. And I think he would actually resign again.
Well said, well said. I think there's just so much happening in our country, but well said, Mrs. Mwila. So we're continuing on our conversation, and now we're going to go to Mr. Austin Kaluva, who is a veteran journalist. Mr. Kaluva. So, Mr. Kaluva, you are a veteran journalist. You have been in this space of journalism for some time. So, a question for you is, as a seasoned journalist, how would you describe Dr. Kaunda's relationship with the media during his time?
Yeah. Contrary to what many people have concluded, that there was a stifling of the press during the Kaunda time. The opposite is true, is the case. During the UNIP era, Kaunda, unless maybe you attacked Kaunda personally, people wrote opinions in the Times of Zambia, which were very critical, and I mean very, very critical of the UNIP government. And they were tolerated. We had columnists like Sam Zuru. I know most of you were young, but the big man, Professor Bizek Jube Zuru, who remember him. We had the Patu Smoko. We had the Capello Msonda on Tuesday. These writers were criticizing the UNIP government. They were criticizing the policies. They were criticizing some behavior of some ministers or political leaders. And the government would act on that. When we reverted to plural politics in 1991, I saw a lot of muzzling of the press than in the Second Republic. That was very ironic. When people were saying we are becoming more democratic, and that's when now they were putting measures in place to stifle the media. So I've challenged so many people who said, no, it was a dictatorship and the media was not free. The media was very free. Even the National Mirror, I know Kaunda at one time complained about what the National Mirror was writing. It was a Catholic newspaper. But Catholics have always been critical. I don't know if they directly come from the Vatican, sometimes unnecessarily so. So I want to take that road. But I'm just saying the tolerance. There was a National Mirror. Long before the post, which was ushered in together with that change in 1991. Before, remember, we had a leftist paper called the National Mirror. That's where I started my career, in Kitwe. It was very critical of the UNIP government, the so-called dictatorship. So Kaunda would tolerate criticism, and in fact, he welcomed constructive criticism. In my journalism career, I would say the time that the media was really the fourth estate, the media is called the fourth estate, it was during the UNIP time. When we reverted to multi-party politics, there was jailing of journalists, harassing them, firing of journalists, which has continued up to now. So I don't know who was a dictator and who is a Democrat now. The line is blurred. I can't tell. So the relationship with the media was very cordial that time. There would be functions in that state house. I wasn't there, but I know my colleagues who are senior journalists. They would interact with Kaunda. He knew journalists very well. He knew a number of journalists personally. When some president who ruled after him, you don't even know who is who in the media. And they think the media, the journalists are their enemies. They are not. If you're allowed to report objectively, the media can help in development. But if you steal for the media too much, they will be telling you lies. You only realize that when you're out of power. It has happened. Many leaders who have cried in public after being removed, they say, I was being told lies. Yes, if you allow the media, the public media, I'm talking about the public media, because the leftist media, again, the founders have got their own agenda, centered on the views of the person who starts that media house. So the public media should be very independent. Let them be free, so long they are also responsible, trained journalists. Again, we have a number of people who are entering this profession. It is not a closely policed profession, unfortunately. So we have a lot of irresponsible journalists who are writing whatever they can lay their pen on. So I think the relationship between the media and the executive under Kaunda was very healthy.
That's good.
Very, very healthy.
That's good. Good to know. So now we're gonna let's follow it up with the second question for you. Do you think the media today is effective? I know you touched on this, but do you think the media today is effectively promoting values such as unity, peace, and national identity?
Unfortunately, it's not. The media is polarized two extremes. We have one end siding with one ethnic group, and the other part. And this is not just the media. Zambia has now been polarized along ethnic lines. It is very unfortunate. And the media is being used as a conduit of this polarization. We have one extreme supporting one ethnic group. We have another extreme. This is also happening in the academia. It is happening in the judiciary. It is happening in the civil service. It is happening in these ecclesiastical institutions. It is happening in traditional leadership. That's what I'm saying. We need to be united, and the media should champion that crusade, because that's what Kaunda started. You remember earlier when I talked about unity, Kaunda realized very early, like Professor Bizek pointed out, that Zambia is a young nation, but these tribes are older than Zambia. The tribes were older than Northern Rhodesia. They were older than the Federation. Zambia is 60 years. Is the Ngoni tribe 60 years old? Is the Lozi tribe 60 years old? Is the Lamba tribe 60 years old? No. There were tribes before Zambia. Mm-hmm. And Kaunda realized it was not just something you pay lip service to. You put measures in place where my father was a prison warder. I remember most of my friends were from Southern and the Western. I didn't know that this was a deliberate construct by the UNIP government, implementing the One Zambia, One Nation practically, not just as a political slogan that ends at a rally. No. Putting one Jovu, if they know he's not married, you join the government, they send you to a province where you marry a girl from the other end. And the media knew about this. One institution is dominated by this tribe, the UNIP government will investigate. Yeah, I'll mention one thing. That there was one time, I don't want to, maybe one institution had too many people from one tribe. I don't want to mention the tribe because again, I'll be joining these camps. But Kaunda would get consent. Because if you champion tribalism, there will always be a backlash. I'm telling you. That's why violence, begets violence. Nobody will just sit back. And the media, like I told, maybe we just need I attended the course at Africa Literature Center, Mindolo Ecumenical, the ethnicity and the media, to avoid what happened in Rwanda. Generally, I know we had Mubanga Kashoki, Professor Mubanga Kashoki, we had the Professor Francis Kakoma. Yes, we talked about how the media was squarely responsible for the Rwanda genocide. We had this the newspaper, radio station, RTLM, I think. It was just broadcasting to the Heartland, and talking about this hate speech till it flared into a full-fledged genocide, which the world up to now we are still frowning. But we don't know that we have the recipes in all society. I'm not blaming one ethnic group, no. Because even us, maybe from this part of the country, despite Kaunda's efforts, maybe the dominance of the executive from 64 to 2021 by one area, the championship. Let's talk about this. That's why journalists are there. Again, we didn't see anything wrong with that. That even the ANC, when it was dissolved through the Choma Declaration, Mainza Chona at the last UNIP convention told me something. I asked him questions, the last UNIP convention. I said, what happened? He said, no, there was plan B. The plan B, I'm making this revelation in the public forum for the first time. There was plan B to arrest Nkumbura. It was given in Kularu mine. Yes, but Kaunda put measures again. The way he valued unity, he told Nkumbura that not even me, I wouldn't sacrifice this region as an individual for when I know the consequences of my action will affect so many people. So there was plan B. But again, when ANC was dissolved, there was a crusade, like the professor mentioned, to incorporate former ANC members into UNIP. The Daniel Munkombwes of this world, the Raja Mtendas. Yes. As the professor mentioned, and I have his book here. This one. I just reviewed it recently in the Times of Zambia. I think I'll be meeting. He is launching the book. I'll meet him for him to sign the book. The media again, and I think they have to be educated about the role of the media. It's very dangerous if they are left and policed. It's very dangerous. Again, I assure you. And this is what is happening. I hear some people on radio stations making very careless tribal statements about the other tribe, and vice versa. Even the other side, even politicians. Till they read this, I think they have to read this book, where we're coming from. That we nearly fought. In fact, there was not fighting. It was killing. Yeah? It started before independence, the killing of Omelo Mumba. There's a street now named after him. By these Maibuye. They call the ANC were called the Maibuyes. And some people were the elites who joined the Capricorn African Society, which the professor has written about. So the media, this moment, I think they just need a workshop on ethnicity and why they should not join both camps. Try to unite us. Let's continue with the Kaunda. I think that's how we can honor him. Let's continue with this legacy of uniting the 73 plus tribes of this country, especially the two biggest ethnic groupings. Zambia loosely has been dominated by 4 tribes: Ngoni, Ozi, Bemba, Tonga. And the 2 ethnic groups have been at the center stage of politics: the Bemba grouping and the Bantu Botatu. So let's acknowledge that fact, and let's not be defensive. Even the Chambeshi Rwangwa group, our role also, what we say about the other tribes, there are these social jokes about the other tribes, and the media have been championing those jokes. About who is this? Again, I won't take that road. It will just maybe open some odd ones. So the media, that's the center stage of uniting us.
That's good. Well said, well said. Yeah, so now we're gonna transition briefly to Mr. Walia, who has been sitting quietly in the background, ready to jump on. So now Mr. Walia will be able to share his thoughts. So Mr. Walia, you as a younger person, the question for you is, as a younger leader, what does Kenneth Kaunda mean to your generation?
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful question, Sandrovo. So as a young leader, what does Kaunda mean to our generation? So I was not there when Dr. Kenneth Kaunda would get out of his comfort zone and went in search of peace. I've inquired, I've watched his documentaries, and I've come to actually conclude that Kenneth Kaunda, to our generation, is a legacy of peace. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, to our generation, is a legacy of unity, is a legacy of humanism, because this is a man who made sure that he fights for freedom, for people to live in a comfortable and welcoming environment where they feel respected, where they feel at home. Is a man who fought for ethnocentrism, is a man who fought for tribalism, is a man who wanted to bring people together. And what I can say is that as a young leader, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda is not just a history, but is a reminder that leadership is not just about power, but it's about serving people with purpose. leadership is about prioritizing the interest and well-being of people. So as young leader, what Kaunda mean to this generation is that this is a man who is a man of peace. It means unity. It means patriotism, because he's a man who loved his nation. He did not just love his nation, but he's a man who loved even Africa at large, because he would put hands together with other African leaders in liberation of different countries for us to have the freedom that we are enjoying today. So he's a man that we can say is a man who defined and who has proved us to say leadership, it's about prioritizing the interests of people. Is a man who has proved that when you are a leader, you have to make sure that your interest, your personal interest, are not above saving the well-being of people. So that's what I can concisely talk about what Dr. Kenneth Kaunda mean to this generation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so well said, sir. And then we'll follow it up with the next question for you. Do young people today feel connected to the values of peace, unity, and humanism, or do these feel distant?
Okay, do young people today feel connected to the values of peace, unity, and humanism? Okay, so what I can say, Sandro, is that I can say they partially feel connected. The reason why I'm saying they partially feel connected, we are now in the generation of in an environment of politics, because of economic hardship now, because of political division, and because of social media influence. These factors have brought, I can say, they have brought frustrations. They have brought conflict among young people, not only young people, but also among, let me just say, citizens. And that's the reason why, because of these factors I've talked about, I feel some people feel deprived of certain things. Some people feel not respected. Some people feel not considered. As a result, other people resort to, not actually being connected to these values which you've asked. As a result, they find themselves in situations where they're actually fighting because of this political division, economic hardship, and social media influence has also contributed to why people and young people in the country don't actually feel connected to these values. And I can say, however, this should not be the case, but it's high time as patriotic citizens, let me say that, as patriotic citizens, we please these values and make sure that we feel connected and we restore the unit, the humanism, and all these positive values that would actually bring all Zambians actually together. That's how I can actually answer your question.
Thank you, sir. Well said. So now we're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we'll circle back to Professor Pili. So this is a time to relax for a few seconds, and here is a song. We'll be right back.
Achileka nishimike kastoleka kwa menichokela watu woiti marima na olewa iseworimba wiyaso na olema no yalopa zedi susakambela tipauka nkoni umbesla kubapana na makolo yeah oh yeah umugende utwalirire wazambia tutwalirire tiende pamozi ndi mutima umozi utwalirire umutende utwalirire tiyende pamozi ndi mutima umozi. Mother Zambia, chalo chanje, awe twalipalwa, twalipalwa ifwe twalipalwa, twalipalwa ifwe twalipalwa.
Yeah, so if you're just joining us, we are discussing the Zambia's first Republican president, the great Kenneth David Kaunda, who struggled and fought for freedom for not only Zambia, but the liberation of Southern Africa. Most of these Southern African countries, when you talk about South Africa, Namibia, and Angola, Zambia contributed greatly. So we are continuing the conversation. So you want to make sure you like our page, follow the channel, and also share with your friends to join us because it helps with the stream. Now we're going to go back to Professor Phiri so that we can pick his brain a little bit. So Professor Phiri, here is the next question for you. To what extent was Dr. Kenneth Kaunda's vision of humanism successful in practice, and where did it face limitations?
Thank you very much, Sanjov, on that very, very important question. To what extent was Dr. Kaunda's vision of humanism successful in practice, and where did it face limitations? First and foremost, when President Kaunda took office in 1964 as President of the Republic of Zambia, Zambia found itself in a world, when you look at the world politics at the time, the world was divided between the East and the Western world. Marxists versus the capitalist world. And President Kaunda was looking at what would be the best way forward for a nation like Zambia, caught up in that geopolitical environment, the politics of the world. So humanism, therefore, became central to accommodate people from different backgrounds who were interacting with Zambia. And humanism, therefore, because it was focusing on the human being, and in most cases, most speeches when President Kaunda spoke, he always talked about man first. So in other words, the human being first. In whatever you do, he always says, you must think of the human being. You must think of the human being. And therefore, by putting the human being at the center, he ensured that humanism, therefore, controlled and was the focus on how people behaved. In that respect, therefore, to ensure that Zambia was not caught up in between, and Zambia, therefore, President Kaunda promoted and became a leading figure in what became the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement, which was very, very powerful. And President Kaunda led that organization for a time, where he was saying, it doesn't matter from which part of the region you come from. It doesn't matter from whether you are from the East or from the West. But as far as Zambia is concerned, we are non-aligned. In other words, he was saying Zambia as a nation and the citizens of Zambia will focus on interacting with the people on the basis that they are human beings. So you look at what is good for the human being. And that's how humanism became the focus and became the national philosophy. And in doing that, he ensured that the young people, we were saying in a number of languages, my cousins, Sanjovo, our cousins, members, what do they say? If you want to educate an elder, you start with a child.
Yes.
So you must start by a child. So President Kaunda decided that the way to educate Zambians and to promote humanism, you have to start from school. The principles in school. I have heard from our colleagues on this forum saying, they were not there, they were just born and so on and so forth. Maybe I'm the only one who was born before independence. But when we went to school, when I was going to school, coming from home, and I'll borrow from what Mrs. Mula talked about, talking about the issue of the role of the parent. The parent, I've always said, and I always tell people that the first teacher of a child is not the teacher at the school, is the mother and the father. And President Kaunda, through the philosophy of humanism, always talked about how parents should mold their children as they are growing up. And because of that, parents always focused on ensuring that we were properly cultured. And when we went to school, humanism was always promoted. I recall in primary school, every time we went to school, as we were singing the national anthem before starting class, we would always be reminded about humanism, who we are as a people, who we were as Zambians, what was expected of us. Through primary school, I went through secondary school from 1970 to 75. In 1975, Mrs. We talked about being the last people to go to national service. Our Form 5, when we finished Form 5 in 1975, our group was the first one for the compulsory national service training. And one of the things that national service emphasized on, and through the teachings of humanism, was that you must be a person that was looking at the good of the next person to you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do things for your own good, but what am I doing? How positively is it affecting the next person? That was the teaching. We came out of national service when I finished 1976 before going to the university. We were well educated and well cultured. The philosophy of humanism was well impacted. And because of that, humanism taught us to be human beings, to be young fellows, and as we are growing up, to be committed and dedicated to our nation and humanity as a whole. And because of that, President Kaunda was a person that everybody looked to as a leader. And support from people was overwhelming. I've always argued that against people who say President Kaunda declared one-party state in 1973 because he was a dictator. I said, no. Then you don't understand what kind of a person he was. This is a man who wanted unity. And this is a man who wanted to ensure that the way we were brought up as a nation, we are looking at each other as one people with love. Mrs. Miller has talked about the issue of intertribal marriage. But President Kaunda and his team, when they did that, they were not going on the pulpit. President Kaunda never did that. He never went on a pulpit that I'm doing this because of this, because of this. No. I remember in 1970, when I finished grade 7, small children from Eastern Province being sent to Western Province, Northwestern Province, all over the provinces, and vice versa, to go to Form 1. And people were crying, why should a small boy, a small girl be taken very far, and yet there's a school nearby? But President Kaunda and his team, under the philosophy of humans, we are all one, we need to work together. That was one way of promoting unity. Yes. And in those times, when people were traveling, and I remember traveling on UBZ buses in those days, being taken from village to go to secondary school. In most, the language was all informed by humanism. So we were growing up as a people that the philosophy of the nation was being inculcated into us. And as we grew, as we were maturing, we were believing people to say we are one people. So in other words, the issue of tribe was not the same. I remember, fortunately, I was from Eastern Province. I went to Katete Secondary School. I went in Form 1, I would have people from different regions. Some of my colleagues in class could not speak a word of Nyanja when they first came to school. But by the time they were finishing 5 years, they had become Easternized. Just like those that from Eastern Province who had gone elsewhere. And our language was the same in terms of how we looked at it, the issues of how are we as people. In those years, during our time, talking about humanism, the first, the week before Independence Day was called Humanism Week. Now, during Humanism Week, this is a week when we were being taught that you must make a contribution to the society in which you are. And it didn't matter where you are, in which part of the country you were. During Humanism Week, we were being taught to go and do community work.
Yes.
I remember when I was in primary school, before I went to secondary school, during Humanism Week, we would be doing community work. There was nothing like you are abusing children, you are making children work instead of going to class. The language are here today. A child goes, the teacher says, no, can you please clean up here? The parents come and shouting at the teacher, how can you make my child work? Why don't you employ cleaners? There was nothing like that. In other words, we are being taught that as a human being, you must learn to do community work. From primary school, when I went to secondary school, for the 5 years I was at Katete Secondary School, we were doing Humanism Week. So now humanism was being inculcated into the children in school, starting from home. Because even our parents also had also been taught about that process. So humanism, therefore, became a very important factor into the nature of a Zambian. I remember when I traveled out of the country, I would land, for example, I arrived at in South Africa because of what Kaunda did to the South Africans for freedom. The moment I give a passport to the passport officers, the moment they see Zambia, the question of how is the old man? They will not say how is Kaunda, how is the old man? What they meant is how is Kaunda? And they'll be saying that man, if it was not for him, we wouldn't be independent today. And his philosophy had spread beyond the borders of Zambia. And today, we are in 2026. When you look at the people who are there who worked and interacted with Kaunda and were influenced by Kaunda's philosophy. Even today, when you look at the way they interact and the way they behave, that is still in them. It is still impacting on this society. So, in short, what I'm saying, therefore, the philosophy of humanism was not just something that Kaunda talked about. It was something that was practiced, he practiced and passed on from generation to generation. And even today, the way Zambians behave, and I'm sure those of people who have interacted with people from outside, they'll always say, but Zambians, you are different. I've been told, Zambians, you are different, the way you interact with people. I'll give an example. When I went to Canada for my PhD in 1987, a Zambian person who I've never met before and didn't know came to Canada. And I was with my wife and my children, and we received this person. And we interviewed. And I was asked a question. Did you know this person? I said, no, I've never met him. I'm meeting this person for the first time. And the person said, you Zambians are different. Because where I come from, a person I've never met before, I cannot tolerate them, bring them into my home, and even have meals with them. I said, no, that's how we are. So in other words, I'm demonstrating that what if the philosophy of humanism taught me is what it taught everyone. Zambia today, as Zambians, when you travel outside, the moment people hear your name, this name must be Zambian, this person must be Zambian. Even if they don't know you, the way they will interact with you is as if you knew each other before. I've been asked several times, did you know this person? No. I'm traveling on a plane. And, somehow, when you are two Zambians, you are most likely you are going to speak in Zambians. The thing about Zambians, we normally speak in English. So some people asked me, you said you are both Zambians, why are you speaking in English? I said, oh, in Zambia, that's the language we speak. Really? Because for them, they have to speak in their mother tongue. And the moment I've mentioned Canada, when I was in Canada, a person, I'll not mention their countries, but people are told this person is not from my tribe, so I can have nothing to do with it. But I said, but in Zambia, it's not like that. It doesn't matter from which tribe one comes from. What matters is that this person is a Zambian. And that's what humanism, which President Kaunda publicized and practiced, has taught us as Zambia. And it's one thing that has cemented the one Zambia motto, humanism. We are together, we are one people. And that is something that will never be challenged. Anyone who wants to destroy that in the Zambian context today is a waste of time. We are already one people. Mrs. Mwira is talking about coming from Eastern Province. She's Mrs. Mwira because she married from somewhere. I'm Professor Piri. But if you come to my home, my other half is from Luapula. So my children are both from Eastern Province and Luapula. And that's how Zambia is.
Yes.
And that was a combination or contribution of President Kaunda's humanism.
Well said, well said. Yeah, so to follow it up with another question, sort of on a similar front, looking at Zambia today, how far have we drifted from or remained aligned with Kenneth Kaunda's original vision?
Well, thank you very much. Looking at Zambia today, how far have we drifted from or remained aligned with his original vision? First and foremost, like I pointed out, 1991, we moved into multi-party democracy. But one of the things that is very, very important that we need to also associate with Kaunda's background of who we are today. You recall that after President Kaunda handed over power to President Chiluba. President Chiluba declared Zambia as a Christian nation. Now, the declaration of Zambia as a Christian nation, that its background is from Kaunda's era. Kaunda emphasized Christianity for this nation because humanism itself has a very strong base in Christianity when you look at its background. So when in 1992 declared Zambia a Christian nation, that in itself was a continuation of what Kaunda had done. And through other presidents that have come, Zambia has remained a Christian nation. And in our practice as a nation of Christianity, that in itself also continues the issue of the philosophy of humanism. There have been attempts, I'm sorry to say, there have been attempts to try and sideline it. But because it is so deeply rooted in the history of this country, whatever policies politicians might want to come up with, they always find themselves coming back to practicing issues of humanism. Even today, most of our leaders are trying very hard to sustain and carry forward the basics of humanistic way of doing things. And because of that, you find that what we are doing in Zambia today is always propelled by the foundation that was left by President Kaunda's humanism and the way he practiced and the way he ensured that the nation moves forward. The declaration of Zambia as a Christian nation is a firm foundation, also ensuring that humanism is there. So sometimes you may not hear the word humanism the way it used to be practiced in the Kaunda days, but even today it's there. You know that even after Kaunda had left office, the week before independence, even today, the week before independence, is a week that Zambians do take part in activities which were exactly similar to what we were doing in the Kaunda days. So in other words, the practices have not been taken away. They are still there, trying to give them different names, but exactly the mentality, the way we think, it is the way we thought how President Kaunda taught us that this is what you do. You find that the week before independence, people are doing community work. It is done even today. You find that in the churches, in the places of work, like where I work at the University of Zambia, during that week, we focus on community work. In other words, we have carried forward the teachings of Dr. Kaunda. So in other words, the issues of humanism have not died, did not die with Kaunda. They have remained and we have carried them forward. So the legacy of President Kaunda was there when he was alive, was there when he retired as president, and they are still there even in his death. We are still carrying on with what he taught us as Zambians.
Thank you, sir. Well said, well said. So if you are just joining us, we are talking about Zambia's first Republican president, Dr. David Kenneth Kaunda, who passed on at the age of 97. Today, he would have been 102 years old. So we are continuing the conversation. At this time, we're going to go back to Dr. Sidney Muponda. Dr. Muponda, the question for you is, through your work, including the anthology on Dr. Kaunda, what themes consistently emerge about his life and leadership?
Okay, thank you. So I should mention that through our interaction with Dr. Kaunda, when he was celebrating his 95th birthday, we realized as citizens of Zambia, as well as his children, that we didn't respond to his letter. Remember, 1972, Kaunda has done letters to my children. So the first anthology we looked at was the responses to letter to my children, because what he had written there needed answers. So in line with that, as well as 2024, we did the Centennial Reflections. This, we invited citizens. So there are 30 citizens of Zambia who contributed poems, essays, as well as the articles to this book, the Centennial Reflection. So you are finding that in 2019, we did the responses, and 2024, we did the anthology that was celebrating Kaunda's 100th birthday. So in these two books, what comes out clearly is that the theme of unity, Kaunda was the unifier. And he took advantage of the very fact that his parents having the history of coming from Malawi, he didn't quite align with any of the ethnic groupings in Zambia, despite even being brought up in Lower Ichisari, partly Bemba and Visa there, but it came out as a unifier. And hence, we are seeing it even 1967, 69, they are coming up with the One Zambia, One Nation motto. Then the next theme that comes out clear is the moral conviction. Kaunda was very clear on what values he stood for. Hence, you see, like what Professor was sharing, our current leadership might be preachy about wanting to have equal opportunity for everyone, following leadership code, but with Kaunda, it was practical. He lived that, he had the moral conviction of what was right and what was wrong. And you see some of the clips where he's addressing Smith, saying, look, what is wrong, and we will not stand for what is not right for our people. And the next theme that you find is the insistence on human dignity, regardless of where the evil was happening, be it apartheid and all this. I think he did a lot of sacrifice. What Zambia, some people would put an argument that Zambia would be different had it focused to use its natural resources and the resources that they had at independence. But you find this is Kaunda was making investment to liberate the region because he believed that human dignity was important. If the next door, our neighbor is not free, they are not having something to eat, it means it's going to affect us. So it's a situation like where when we are living in a space where you are secure and your neighbor is not secure, you are the next target when they are tired of being angry and all this. So Kaunda believed in the human dignity and the relationship that we needed the people around us to be free. And I think if you check around the history, the meetings in Kano, around the liberation of Zimbabwe, the liberation of Namibia, the liberation of South Africa, it championed that, and some would say at the expense of Zambia, but he had hopes that these people would actually respect and also support Zambia. So these are the three components. Then you see the other component, which is very critical, is education and formation. He didn't believe in the education for the purpose of someone getting credentials. He believed in the education that will form the people to develop a belief in themselves, to develop a belief in loving the country, being patriotic. And as Professor was sharing, in terms of pushing humanity, is where he wanted the education that formed the character that man will be at the center. Whatever you do should be for the benefit of human beings. Of course, he was using the word man because just like Che will justify man will mean man and woman. It's about humanity per se in that context. So he believed that people should not only be developed and only be governed, but they should be given also the capability to develop and to being leaders. And this led to a major theme that you would find in Kaunda is the public conscience. you need to be aware that what I'm doing, it's basically the theories that we learn in political science, those who have had the chance, like where your rights end, another person's rights start. Where your privileges are ending, another one should. So as a human being, you should not do anything that affects the other humans. And in terms of today's topics, I think Kaunda was also big in terms of the care for the environment. And this was informed by sustainability, that the future generation should find something. Interacting with the family members and all these, saying, he would be encouraging the children when they have served on their plates that, no, finish. Someone doesn't have this. You have to finish because you have served. You have had your share. So you have to finish, my brother. Young man, finish what you have served. No, but I'm satisfied. No, finish. No, this, I don't like the type. Says, why did you serve? Please get some courage and motivate yourself to finish, because someone is barely surviving elsewhere. So we should not. I think our brothers from Ireland, it's among the bigger thing that want not, spend not. So you don't use what you don't actually require. You have to set the limit. You are better off saving half a lamp and then go back and dish out again, rather than save 4 lamps and then after getting one and saying, no, I am full. If it's the little ones, they say, me, I'm a fool. I am full. You know, things of that nature. So Kaunda had this serious issue of public conscience. He spoke like someone who believed leaders must answer. And this is what he insisted. Of course, he even told me in person, especially when we responded to the letter to my children. He said, I think it's also written in the letter to my children, that Kaunda was Kaunda, and historians, other experts will say whatever they want to do. But he said he was answerable to 2 components without that turning our humanity. He was giving leaders must always answer to history and also answer to God. If you don't want to put the word God in case, you can use answer to the universe, because the universe gives us the responsibility as human beings. We have a social contract to do good and not to harm anyone. So he believed that leaders and citizens of the world should be able to answer to history as well as to God. And how did Kaunda answer to history? We know the historian is in the house, that in 1860 we had the visitors who came and colonized us and created a space which was not friendly, as they divided northeastern Rhodesia and northwestern Rhodesia. Northwestern Rhodesia, to some extent, was a protectorate, and northeastern Rhodesia was totally colonized, but by the company then until 1911 and later 1924, when the British, they merged us 1911 and 1924, handed over to the British Overseas Office. Now, when he is saying all these things as they were happening, he needed also to control certain things that exposed us. Part of it were traditional leaders. They were a little bit too easy to welcome these visitors. And need to put in system that, yes, they remain significant, but to some extent they need to have a certain level of control. But some of the things are occurring. Today, traditional leaders are selling land and all this. So with Kaunda is saying in his submission, under this issue, public conscience, if we are not able to answer to history, to knowing what led us to be colonized, even if for me personally, I don't believe now that the colonialization story is valid. It's now the colonialization as well as the lack of public conscience, lack of patriotism by ourselves as citizens and leaders that is underdeveloping us, because we cannot rely on that old story. It's past. We have the instrument of power within ourselves. Whatever Kaunda did, good and the bad and the ugly in the 27 years, we went to the multi-party democracy and all these. But all these, it reminds us that we need to respond to East and to God. And finally, the last of the the themes that stands out in the life of Kaunda and these publications that we have done here is the theme of perseverance. And this is the idea that leadership is not a moment. Leadership is not about sitting in the office and start shouting, go and bring that document, go and have that one, go and do that. No, he's talking about leadership is not a moment, but it is a long discipline of sacrifice. There is a lot of sacrificing that goes on, and there is also the component of prudence in decision making. You have to look at what is the impact of this. So even as you you look at the enforcement of the law, the enforcement and implementation of policies, what do you do at what particular time? There are certain good initiatives that, for example, various governments have done, but without the correct timing, some of the implementation and interventions we do for the good of the nation, they actually begin to harm the nation. And this is where you find the nation is going around in debt. You find the same circle of how public servants are employed. You find the same circle of how we neglect areas like where we are, the arts, the publishing, the documentation of this. They are not priorities. You even look at what has happened, some of the scores the country was making around the area of national guidance, which Kaunda made a priority, and that to put it at the planning stage of the nation. Whenever you are doing the planning, the Ministry of National Planning had to have specialists looking at how do we ensure that in all the programs, national values are promoted. But sometimes you track, where are we as a people? And you realize that these are no longer priorities because we are now focusing on numbers. And with that, it raises questions on how are we making certain sacrifices where we could put investment in issues that promote values, the issues that unify families, the issues that are going to lead to people thinking sustainability and the people thinking us, not to be greedy that, okay, I'm one of the richest, I need to be identified as such with a lot of pomposity, power, popularity, and it's new as a lot of assets. So from the life of Kaunda and the generation that was with him, we pick out the three critical issues that they had a transformative mindset. That's so the University of Zambia, which is now closing because of whatever issues are there. They had a transformative mindset that this is the person who didn't go to the university himself, was setting up the university in 1966, which was not a might not been fashionable to do because the team was working with, they didn't have that level of education. But this is the person who was looking to the future, that we need to develop the human resource. This is the people who had led the lifestyle that was based on values. They chose what they hate. They chose where they found themselves. I think they are not among the readers. They could be one, the Sipalos and all these who would drink themselves out. But the majority of the team that Kaunda worked with, they were highly disciplined of what they did. Even if they drank, they were at home or somewhere secretive, as it were. Then these are the people who had a selfless service. They gave it all, and then they went back, not with millions, but this time around you are seeing public service. It's a way of, I think it's one of the richest way to make money when you become and you call yourself honorable. Even if you are not in parliament, you want to be called honorable, even when you are just aspiring. So it's some of these issues I think Kaunda would remind us today that no, ladies and gentlemen, service should be at the core. And I think one of the things in our conversation was you would prefer and encourage people that make your money, get rich, and come to serve as part of more of corporate service and getting the ideas of what you have learned from your private sector, then you come to public service. But seemingly people are going in public service to become, yeah. So those are the things that I've highlighted: unit, moral conviction, insistent on human dignity, education and formation, public conscience, as well as perseverance.
Thank you, sir. Well said, well said, well said. Yeah, so now as we are moving forward, you want to, if you are just joining us, we are discussing Zambia's first Republican president, Dr. David Kenneth Kaunda, who is no longer with us, but his memories, his work, his leadership, his compassion, his humanity still lives on in all of us as Zambians. What responsibility does the media carry in preserving national values like one Zambia, one nation?
Yeah, again, you see, the media doesn't work in isolation. It works with other collaborators and under a certain political system. So the promotion of national values during the UNIP days, we had a Department of National Guidance. Imagine we had that department, where the nation was guided. It looked dictatorial at that time, but in its absence, now we are missing that. After seeing the consequences of being too free and policed and harnessed to any system and harnessed to any moral guidance. This is Mwila talked about this newspaper story that came out, 9,000 divorces in one city. That is a reflection of, how culturally lost we are as a people. We don't know who we are. We are a cyber society. We are a westernized society. There are three institutions that govern us. There is the church, then we have tradition, which is not even properly adhered to. Then we have modernity. So minus guidance, all this, the trinity of these influences, it is disastrous. The result is disastrous. We find a society that has got no roots whatsoever. Kaunda, certain things would even intervene. When Zambia was playing a lot of Western music, Kaunda intervened. When Zambians were drinking a lot, even again threatened to quit. Said, I can't lead a nation of drunkards. When one of his ministers, Shivanda, I can mention his name now, he had taken too much to the bottle, Kaunda, commented. When one of the ministers is still alive, no, it was not a minister, it was a public figure. He was marrying, he was very young, he was already in his third marriage. Kaunda told him, I hope this is the last wedding I'm attending. That is how Kaunda, policed both the nation and the leaders. So how can the media, we have the media now, we have so many millennials who themselves are coming from a poorly parented background, they're not properly parented like us, or my professor who went to ZNS and who came from backgrounds where family values were cherished. So the media, we're talking of millennials, they don't even want to share that there's this problem. Nobody covered extensive, when that revelation was made of 9,000 divorces in one city. I expected an avalanche of comments from all sectors. We should be concerned. The family is the smallest unit. We all come from families. Hitler came from a family. Serial killers came from families. Saddam Hussein, whoever, whether Trump or... So if something is wrong from your family, as Professor Piri said, the first teacher is your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if things are wrong there, it's not the teachers who should remedy. It's not a correctional center, reformatory. No, there must be some values when you bring a child to school, inculcated in the child from school. So even a journalist comes from a home. A politician comes from a home. So if we have politicians who are insisting on being called honorable when they are not honorable, we have a problem there. So the media, the values have started from home to calculate those national values. Thank you.
The question for you is, how can student leadership spaces help to revive a sense of national unity and responsibility?
Okay, thank you so much for for that wonderful question, Mr. Ndorovu. I think as a student leadership, we are not just mandated to serve the interest of the students, but also to foster national unity, identity, and also humanism. And coming to answering your question, I think our responsibility and obligation in serving is not just limited within the vicinity of campus, but also we must also extend the fostering of national unity even on national level. And in schools, universities, colleges, and other learning institutions, we are having students who are coming from different ethnic groups, and it is our responsibility that we curb this issue of tribalism, this issue of ethnocentrism. Instead, we need to bring students together. We need to make sure that even when we are making decisions, we bring everybody on board in the decision-making process, so that everybody feel considered, and also we can help in fostering unity by conducting events which will promote actually unity among students who are coming from different tribes, because our responsibility here, and also other leaders who are coming from other learning institutions, they must understand that promoting unity, promoting humanism, and bringing people together is not only the responsibility for those national leaders who are there, but it is the responsibility of every meaningful patriotic citizens to make sure that peace is preached in our conversation, respect is preached in our conversation, and also trying to organize the events which will be there to enlighten students and also other people out there to come to realization that we are one people, and there must be no segregation, and we need to actually embrace each other despite coming from different ethnic groups. Thank you so much.
So with that background, I want to say that because of that, I want to mention that if Zambia could just get back on the track of humanitarian concern and approval that Dr. Kaunda laid the foundation about. And I know that, one of the speakers mentioned the Ministry of National Guidance, a beautiful idea and institution that was set up, but I think served the wrong purposes. And really, if that institution was allowed to, to deliver what it meant, like it was important for Zambia to profile the family system in an institution like that, because you can see that our governance system has got ministries that are focusing on specific functions of governance. You have the Ministry of Finance looking after finance. You have the Ministry of Youth Sport. So all these things, for them to be profiled and really given much attention in terms of resources, in terms of development and progress and actually outcomes. The Ministry of National Guidance was a great idea, but obviously we all know what happened and where we are now. And when we talk about that ministry, the family system needed to be on top of everything. Why? Because religion does not come before family. You may want to know that in the whole world, right from the beginning, the first institution was the family. Governments came after family. Religious institutions came after family. So the beginning is the family system. And now, because our priorities did not work well, as can easily be seen, we misrepresented what we wanted to do. And as a country, I want to inform you that can you imagine that this country of Zambia does not have a family policy? A policy that should guide the foundation, establishment, management, and actually sustainability of the family system. The roles of that policy are thrown all over the place. You have right now, as an institution, Families and Nations, we are working very well with the Ministry of Community Development, because that is where we are guided, that is where the family is sitting. But if you and I, if we look at the details of the family, should it sit at community development? Family in its own must be a ministry.
The word Samaritan is a derivative of Zambia and Samaritan. We define a Samaritan as an individual that volunteers their most valuable resource, which is time, for the amelioration of their communities. Community refers not to spatial connectivity, but to individuals and groups with common interests and goals. At Samaritan, we believe that enhanced citizen participation, which is the inclusion of independent individuals, helps transition communities economically, using education as the initial change driver, resulting in socioeconomic improvement. Our mission, Samaritan's mission, is to promote the efficacy of the education system and existing structures of local institutions through close collaboration with volunteers who would add value through the myriad of life experiences, academic achievements, and corporate exposure. This translates into effective and efficient operations through the mobilization of volunteers. Our vision to be the overarching pioneer in promoting volunteerism in Zambia through education. Join the movement, www.zamaritan.org.
All right, so if you're joining us, we are looking at the life of Zambia's first Republican president, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda. At this moment, I'm going to go ahead and share there is a movie project trying to depict the life of Kenneth Kaunda that has been in the works for some time. We are still working to, it's a $20 million project. I am one of the people who is trying to see how we can coordinate and bring the right people with the right wallet to help us move forward, documenting the history of Kenneth Kaunda. So those who are interested to learn more, please, we ask you to visit our website, and then we'll be able to share a little bit more, or you can get in touch with us and to be able to share. But it's important for a man of this stature, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, who is not only a Zambian icon, but is an African icon. A movie about his life, his achievement, it's something that should have been done a long time ago. So this is a little clip about the man that we have all come to love so much, Dr. Kaunda.
When we look back the path which led to this conference room today, we cannot entirely forget, but we can certainly forgive the days of our imprisonment and the occasions when many of us have been subject to personal indignities and hardship because of our political ideas.
Zambia does not have the capacity to strike back at the enemy
because the enemy has been prepared for the last 60, 70 years, South Africa, for the last 54 years, Rhodesia. What's more, centuries behind them coming from the Western countries.
Yes, that's the movie. The working title is The Struggle, depicting the life, like I said, of Kenneth Kaunda. Zambia today is facing challenges such as gender-based violence and breakdown of the social values. How can Zambian humanism be applied practically within families today?
Thank you. So first of all, it's for Zambians, ourselves as a nation, to realize who we are as a nation, that we are a nation that embraces the foundational values that Dr. Kaunda set for us. We can't, if we can carry those and add value to what Dr. Kaunda did, we'll be in a better position to achieve some of these much needed milestones. We need to look at how the family system is established. And I was just talking before I broke off that we need a government machinery that is largely and fully focused on the issue of family and family well-being, as opposed to where this issue is just a segment of some department, some division, and some establishment. Family is huge for Zambia. Right now, the social ills we are facing, if you look at them, the root cause is the family. That is where the roots are sitting. You cannot move forward if the attitudes of our youth, that are founded at family level, and every speaker here has attributed to the fact that our young people are key to the transformation of our situation now. But these young people are coming from the family system. So the question is, what is happening there at the bedrock, at the family system? How are marriages being, contracted? How are we engaging in terms of parenting systems? How is the government applying whatever resources it has to make the lives of Zambians better? Where is the family in that system? Because when you hand out things, you hand out support, and the family doesn't know how to raise, how to manage those resources, you are shifting in the air. So my point is that we need to use the family system as an effective agent of behavior change, of management, leadership, and national development, peacekeeping, unity. It's just at family level. So for me, I just want to say that we need to go back to the drawing table. We need to come up with policies that are family oriented and looking at how we can use the family system to maintain the peace, the unity that Dr. Kaunda, led us into. And even at leadership level, we are fighting vices such as corruption. We are fighting vices such as we have children who have become like an army against their own. We are, for lack of a better word, we are talking about junkies. Those are people's children. They belong to someone. They have got fathers and mothers. But because of how are we fighting these social ills? How are we targeting them? What is the mode of operation for us to get the right thing doing? We need to go back to the family system. And I want to say that the laws that manage marriage in our country, they have to be user-friendly in a Zambian atmosphere. They were made, some of them were done by our colonialists. What have we done ourselves as a nation? That laws that govern marriage are equal and sustainable for us as a nation, for as Zambians, as 73 tribes. What have we done even to change those laws? We need to pay attention to that. I think that movie, makes me feel very comfortable that we can relive Dr. Kaunda's legacy. As families and nations, we want to continue to ensure that we profile the family system as that one institution that can help us to work on every other sector of the Zambian nation.
Premier Media is one of the fastest growing independent media enterprises that produces bias-free content and streams educational programs to empower Africans, African Americans, and the African diaspora around the globe. Premier Media owns and operates a valuable portfolio of streaming programs, such as Primetime Show, The Circle of Love, Leadership Files, and Revolution. Not forgetting our signature development panel series, which features experts around the world that highlight challenges and opportunities in Africa, putting Africa in the center of global conversations. For more information, visit us at premiermedia.com or follow us on social media.
All right, so we are in the final stretch of our program today, looking at Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, the man, the legend, the founder, and the first Republican president of Zambia. So now we are going to the closing statement for our panelists here. So now you want to keep it to at least in a minute, so I think, because we've gone beyond our time. So let's keep it at least to a minute and a half for the most part. So okay, let's go to Mr. Kaluba. Your final thoughts to our listeners on this conversation. Mr. Kaluba, take it away.
Yeah, to me, Kaunda was too many things he wrote in one. Even our values as a nation, who we are as Zambians, I think Kaunda understood the country that was governing very well. So to emulate him, it means raising the standards at a personal level, at a national level, and the way Zambia relates to the outside world. So the media should know who this man is. I met some journalists who don't know much about Kaunda, and I wonder how the founding father, it's like you don't know your grandfather, you just have this name Njovu. Who was the Njovu senior? Who was the Muponda senior? You are coming from that background. So as the media, they should have at least an obligation to educate Zambians who Kaunda was and the values he stood for. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, sir. So we go to Dr. Muponda. Your final thoughts?
Thank you. It has been an honor for me and privilege that I interacted with Kaunda, and as Soten publishers, we continue to prioritize the story, especially the nation when it's going under a dangerous path where we have young people following argument and selective praises on social platforms. This is a call that we make to the people who love Zambia, Africa, and humanity as a whole to invest in the preparation of books that have reliable teaching materials and well-created stories that will continue to celebrate lives of Kaunda and the lives of those who worked with him, the founding values. And then also support initiative like where we are celebrating having like Fitavo International Book Fair, where we are celebrating and archiving the motion of what it has been. And the key message for readers, especially young people, in line with the legacy of Kaunda, is that be disciplined enough to save and courageous enough to unite, because a nation is built through character, not comfort. We don't need to do and make decisions of what is comfortable and relatable. And we should understand that unity is not merely political, it's a moral issue, and we have the contractual obligation as humans to contribute to the welfare of the nation. And when it comes to humanism, it is not charity alone. It's how you treat every person as a full human, because Kaunda stood for the focus of dignity of humanity. And with that, let's continue celebrating the man, his time, as well as his legacy for what he has done for Zambia, Southern Africa, Africa as a continent, and the world. Let's be good human beings.
Thank you. Well said, sir. And now, Professor Phiri, your final thoughts.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you very much. It has been a blessing, and I've learned quite a lot from the other speakers. I think one of the things that I think the Zambians, particularly the younger generation where we are going, that they need to not forget is that they need to read about where we are coming from. What I find very sad of the younger generation today is this blind support for leadership, for politicians, without appreciating where we have come from. I think in any nation, history is very, very important. Now we are talking about documentation. Mr. Kalu, I think, has emphasized that very, very well, documentation. But also what we need to appreciate is that history has different levels. Where we are coming from, before Western education, we have what we call oral history. We know who we are because of what our parents told us. When I was growing up in the village, our parents taught us who we were and how people in Eastern Province related with each other and how Zambia became what it is. So, but education came and writing came. Books are there. And as you can see from my background as I'm speaking, there are a lot of books. If you were to see this, I'm at home right now. This is my home. It's not at Onza, at the office, but this is my home. I have a lot of books because I appreciate reading and writing books. It is important to document our history. And focusing on Dr. Kaunda himself, a lot has been written about him. And when you read his works, you begin to appreciate what leadership for a nation is supposed to be, what leadership in a family is supposed to do, because every aspect of Dr. Kaunda has been documented and a lot we can learn from him. Currently, I'm working on my own book on Dr. Kaunda, which maybe in another 6 months it will be done, because he's one person that actually captures my attention and I've really appreciated. Having met him, traveled with him from Zambia to the UK when he was being honored by a university there, you could see how much he's valued, not only here in Zambia, but even at the international arena. They valued him because of the leadership that he presented and he portrayed. Other leaders today, whether they like it or not, if they want to lead Zambia to be a better Zambia in the future, they need to learn how this founding father of this nation grounded and modeled this country. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to share this platform with all of you.
Thank you. Well said, gentlemen. I greatly appreciate you for taking time to be on this conversation, remembering, reflecting on the works of our first Republican president, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda. Until we circle back, possibly we hope to hear from you next year when we have another conversation on our Republican President, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Again, I thank you, and I see the book there. We want to encourage people to read. And I think me not being in the country, if somebody can ship it to Trump Nation, I'll greatly appreciate, or if there's a way where we can get it, some of us who are outside Zambia. So we'll greatly appreciate, because it's always important, and I like what people have said on the program here. We have to tell our own story from our perspective. So this is why we have this conversation, because it's important that stories are told from the perspective of our people. Mandela was still labeled as a terrorist, even being a president. The ANC fighting for freedom, it was labeled as a terrorist group. So this is why it's important for us to change this stereotype that Kaunda was a dictator when he was a man of peace, pushing humanism and promoting our country. So again, I just want to thank you. I appreciate you all. Until we circle back on a future program, it's thank you for taking time, and it's bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.